well, we've been covering the issue of the Holocaust Memorial Bill and the government's desire to build a new memorial towards the Holocaust in the centre of London for quite some time. What's the latest on that?
Well, as of today, it goes to the report stage in the House of Lords, and this will enable us to give a further insight into the intense politicisation of the issue and the apparent desperation which successive governments have tried to push through an initiative that was, importantly, rejected by the planning authority, and for very sound reasons. Now, the latest development is that the co-chairs of the Holocaust Foundation have been sending out letters to garner support for the proposed memorial, and some of these are very much worth mentioning because of who they've gone to and the language used. Now, it's fair to say, I think, that some of the language used in that letter is strong. In particular, quote, "The United Kingdom is a leader in the global response to Holocaust denial and distortion. The uniqueness of the Holocaust must be preserved in memory. There are too many countries attempting to rinse their history through the Holocaust. Interest groups hijack the language of genocide for petty and sometimes sinister reasons." End quote. Now, of course, in this fairly long letter, they're very cautious to avoid any of the issues of the direct controversy, such as the destruction of the Victoria Tower Gardens, or indeed the planning process, which has been an enduring and so far unsuccessful issue. They're certainly not shy of making best use, in terms of an opportunistic sense, of the conflict in Gaza in order to expedite their cause. And as part of the amendments for the report stage, one says that there's a clause to be inserted saying the sole purpose of any learning centre must be the provision of education about the genocide of the Jews and anti-Semitism. Now, also going into looking at the letters and the recipients and the responses, when one considers sort of independence and due process, I think it should be of concern. There's been interaction with the Metropolitan Police Service, who really should be remaining independent of any such decision-making. But nonetheless, there's a reply in there from Matt Jukes, who's now Deputy Commissioner, and he concludes by saying, overall, although security arrangements will need to be extensive, we consider that the proximity to Parliament brings as many benefits as risks from a security perspective. And he goes on to say he looks forward to discussing it further with you. Now, it's a curious statement to end on, in that if there are security considerations, how can that be a benefit? How can it be said to be bringing benefits? Of course, this is political language, which is very much unbecoming of the Metropolitan Police Service. This is reinforced by John Stevens, who was Commissioner back in 2005, and he talks about public access and safety concerns and maintaining public access to the gardens during and after construction. Now, he effectively undermines the whole process by talking about security arrangements being in line with those to other public buildings in Westminster. So we're talking about bag checking, scanning at an entrance pavilion, which totally distorts the purpose of the gardens. And indeed, people need to book tickets and all the rest of it. Now, the other thing to point out is that at the Imperial War Museum just over the river, there are, of course, the existing Holocaust galleries. And here we see on the map the proximity to one another, less than a mile apart, again undermining this as being a location. And also put forward in the amendments, very significantly with regard to planning, is that they're to consider for the first time alternative locations for security purposes. They're also to consider alternative designs and something that's going to be more sympathetic, perhaps. And also there's a case for saying that they might have overblown the anti-Semitism angle, in that now, because security is deemed to be such a strong consideration, that this site might be considered to be too dangerous. But mainly, they need approval from the Historic Buildings and Monuments Commission for England, and indeed UNESCO, before anything can go ahead. And significantly, that it must not adversely affect any other memorial or the setting of such memorials in Victoria Tower Gardens, and indeed the integrity of the Victoria Tower Gardens as a green space dedicated to the well-being of local people in perpetuity, which was what was set in legislation in 1900 and has been ridden roughshod over. Now, therefore, I would conclude by referring to the parks, the Royal Parks Authority, which of course are talking about the Victoria Tower Gardens boasting a stunning range of sculptures that celebrate freedom. And essentially the central purpose here is that the gardens were designed for a particular purpose, and there's no doubt the Holocaust Memorial subverts those purposes entirely. So given these conditions and the amendments, it should be impossible to see how this can proceed, but we will follow it nonetheless.
Thank you, Charles. Sandy, let's then